now, so I'm being recorded. We are being recorded. I'm going to keep going on chapter 3 today. Chapter 3 is about socialization, and I'm going to cover material from near the end of chapter 3, and in particular, I want to try to move back and forth between socialization as a topic of sociological analysis, socialization as you experience it in your lives, and socialization as we're engaging in it right this minute through the mechanisms of the internet. And I want to try to have those three different, analytically different realities, let's say, overlap and interact one with the other in order to demonstrate to you from each of your own perspectives how it is that sociology at its best operates. So I'm going to try to explain some concepts. I'm going to try to help you locate those concepts in your own experiences of what it is we're doing as we're doing it. And so in order to keep me on track, and I hope in order to make some of what I've just described happen, I'm going to switch from a picture of me blabbing to some PowerPoint slides. Okay, so that didn't work. Hang on. Be right with you. I thought I had it queued up, but that doesn't happen. Okay, so in the first part of the chapter, the textbook describes socialization, how it is that humans acquire, how humans are introduced to and internalize the different aspects of their culture, understood as the materials and aptitudes and objects and X, Y, and Z of the things that make up our social reality. And the process of the acquisition of those things is what sociologists refer to as socialization. And the textbook goes on to explain that the family, from the perspective of sociology, so sociologists who've analyzed this have described many of the different ways, and they among themselves disagree about virtually every aspect of this, except perhaps that this is the case, namely that families are a theoretically and practically crucial location for how it is that the majority of humans in all societies actually acquire these skills and aptitudes and tastes and dispositions and so on. So the family's super important, not at all surprising. When sociologists turn their attention to trying to describe this, they run into a challenge we'll take a look at in a later chapter, about how exactly to define what the family is. And there's lots and lots of different ways, and there are lots and lots of different contexts within which those different ways are implemented. But the common the result of all of those overlapping approaches is a very, very strongly shared consensus that corresponds very closely to most people's everyday views in any event, that for most people, families are super important. That general claim is 100% compatible with possible exceptions. For some people, maybe that wasn't the case. The sociological claim is that for overwhelmingly most people, overwhelmingly in a statistical sense, if you ask 100 people, most of those people, 90, 99, some very high percentage of those people are nearly certain to tell you that a great deal of what they've learned about how to be a human came from their early experience in life. And most people describe the people who surround them at that stage in their life as their family. So family's important. The next group, in terms of importance, in terms of the extent of the impact over the course of a person's entire life for the process of socialization, the group of people that surround you in your early life are the next most important group in terms of impact over the course of your life. And in 2021, for the significant majority of people on Earth, that operates through a modern institution, that is public education. And so, statistically speaking, again, most human beings who are, let's say, 30 years of age today, when they were between 5 and 12 years old, went to a public school, went to a school anyway. Of course, there are exceptions for a number of different reasons, but in most societies today, 30 years ago, if you go back 20 years, so the 30-year-olds today, 20 years ago when they were 10 years old, statistically speaking, in most societies in the world, there was some fairly widespread publicly available education system. And what that does is it brings people together and it socializes them into, among many other things, the expectations of that society and the self-understanding of that society's own expectations for its newest members. Society, the goal of an educational system is not only to teach each individual person to become an adult, it's also to teach that generation together to become adults together. And so it's important to understand that the school system understands itself and is tasked with the role of accomplishing transformations both in individuals and through the individuals through cohorts of people. And the reason that's crucial is because one of the important components that individuals are, that results in individuals participating with, in the earliest part especially, an education system, is that they're taught to interact with other people. So unless my sort of standard exception to that is if you end up becoming a lighthouse operator. Does anyone know what a lighthouse is? What's a lighthouse? Right. A lighthouse is usually a tall building, a building that's tall enough that it can shine a light far out from the coast. It's a building on a coast, so at the edge of a landmass next to a large body of water where typically ships travel. And in order to prevent the ships from crashing onto the shore, older societies built tall towers with lights that shone out to the sea to alert the ships that they were near the shore. And normally it only required one person. So it's a solitary kind of occupation, and it's meant to be an example of the exception to how it is that most people conduct their work lives. Most people operate, the work that most people undertake, paid work that is, involves cooperating with other people. And for that reason, among others, the educational system produces humans who are better able to work with other humans than they otherwise would be. And the name that sociologists and psychologists have given to those groups of people who go through that process together is peer groups. And so the definition, our working definition, is going to be peer groups are the institution or the process or the mechanism through which people integrate into a larger group or society. And so early, the textbook describes how, especially for people who are adolescents and young adults, for my own interest, actually, if you don't mind, I'd like some feedback here. At what age do you think someone becomes an adult? At what age would you consider someone else an adult? Let's put it that way. Not at what age would you consider yourself an adult. Does that sound right to everybody? So if the only thing, yeah, so what I mean here, the question I'm asking you to reflect on is, if the only thing you knew about someone else was their age, and so you knew about person X that they were a certain age, 25 is where you would start thinking of them as an adult. So now the last one, the last suggestion, let me just get the name here. Hadia said 21 technically. Now that's an interesting way of putting it. And how do you understand technically? Did you mean legally? So in Canada, anyway, I'm not sure that 21 is a threshold in any legal way. At 18 in Canada, you get to vote. At 16, you're allowed to drive if you pass the other requirements. In Ontario, you can vote when you're 18. You can join the military when you're 18, but you can only start drinking and smoking marijuana legally when you're 19 years of age. So 21, I'm not sure if in Ontario 21 has any legal ramifications. I'm pretty sure that at 18 you can enter into contracts. I think it's 18 now, the arbitrary legal age for most, the arbitrary kind of legal cutoff. But I'm asking a more seemingly anyway subjective kind of use of the term adult. And so Brenda's suggestion was 25 years of age. And that's a shifting boundary. And it's one of the conclusions that sociologists have been tracking, or one of the observations, say, that sociologists have been tracking, is that in many, many societies today in 2021, particularly rich societies, rich, that is, relative to global benchmarks, GDP per capita, gross domestic product per capita is the most widely used measure for the wealth of a country. How rich a country is, the higher the gross domestic product per capita, the richer the country is deemed to be. And in the richest countries in the world, when you compare attitudes in 2021 to attitudes, say, in 1961, by and large, the age at which young people are considered to be adults is getting older and older and older. And so in 2021, there are many, many organized groups who purport to represent youth whose leadership are all in their early 30s. And there's a bunch of different things going on there. But one of the conclusions that's broadly shared by sociologists is that in Ontario and in Canada and in North America and in many other rich countries, the transition from childhood to adulthood is occurring over a longer period of time and up to an older and older age. And that we'll take a look at in a couple of other contexts as we move through the course. What I wanted to get on board early, I wanted to introduce you to the notion of peer groups. Peer groups come to form a very important subjectively and in many, many ways demonstrably, that is objectively important role in the lives of humans after a certain age. Once you end up in school, so in elementary school, then in high school, a transition seems to occur around the sources of socialization, the impact and the consequences of socialization. These vary, of course, from person to person, but by and large, when you're 3 years old, it's the small circle of people that you see every day who have the greatest impact on your life. And when you're 10 years old compared to when you're 3 years old, that circle of people for most people in 2021 is very different. In 2021, in Toronto, for example, when you're 10 years old, you go to school every day during the school year, and you see the 30 or so students who are in your class and your teacher for a lot more than you see, for many people anyway, than you see your brothers and sisters, if you have any, or your mom and dad, or your guardians, or whoever, whatever group of people surround you when you're not participating in school. So simply in terms of hours of contact in modern societies, the amount of contact you have with your classmates and your teacher and the institution of the school is a, statistically speaking, big thing, let's say. And one of the consequences of that increased contact is that you're integrated into, that you're turned into a part of that group. Now, of course, when we reflect back onto, say, grade 5 or something along those lines, from the perspective of being 20, I have available to me, in a way that probably most of you don't, the perspective of thinking back to when I was 20 and I was in college or university in my case, and I have a good distance on that. You don't yet have that, but all of you have available to you, or probably all of you, certainly most of you have available to you, that perspective back to when you were 10 years old. And most of you can identify the extent to which you felt like you were integrated into that group. And when you were 10, I forget what grade that is. Is that grade 6 or something? Whatever grade that is. And you felt like you fit right in, or you felt like you were an outsider to some degree. There's sort of a continuum of belonging within which individuals who are in a classroom setting experience the participation in that group setting. Now, one of the even more recent developments, so the education, institutionalized education as a dominant contributing factor of human socialization, is maybe the hallmark, or one of the top 2 or 3 most characteristic features of what sociologists understand by modern society. What makes a society modern from a sociological point of view is the world of work and the world of publicly available education. The history of how that came to be, maybe I'll talk about in a different class, but for today, I'm afraid you'll have to take my word for it. What sociologists mean by modern society, among other things, is a society in which most people in that society attend school until they transition to the world of work. In older societies and in other societies, that wasn't the case. That was a modern innovation. Prior to the modern world, overwhelmingly, most people began work as soon as they could. For most of the history of humanity, most people started working when they were 5 or 6 years old. Now, often, and for mostly that was in agricultural work. So it wasn't like you were going to the factory or the office when you were 7 years old, but you were put to work. We were put to work much, much younger in pre-modern societies. In modern society, for its continued operation, requires much, much more and much longer and much more expensive preparation to begin to function adequately in the world of organized work. And so modern society is characterized by a much longer period of preparation for that, much of which is for the acquisition of specific aptitudes and skills and knowledge. But also, a key component of that is this socialization dynamic. And so humans are prepared for the world of modern work by going through this socializing process in schools. In the last X number of years, and we'll get to the number, so basically, contemporary sociologists have suggested a dividing line, people born before 1980 and people born after 1980. And it's around the importance of media, mass media, internet media, and the crucial, it's becoming increasingly clear that socialization is also occurring through these mass media, these electronic media. And this was becoming clear before COVID, and COVID is making it even clearer that it's happening, not at all yet clearer how it's happening. Why would I think that? What is it about COVID that would be demonstrating that? It follows almost logically from what I was just saying before. Well, at this very second, we're doing it. So right this minute, I'm involved on my side, and all of you are involved on your side in the education system. And I just described how, from a sociological point of view, the education system, one of the things it's doing is socializing you to prepare you to be socially functional in the world of work in the 21st century. All of you, I imagine, know, and if you don't know, I'm about to tell you that the labor market into which you are about to enter, or in the case of many of you, the labor market in which you already are participating in some ways, is highly mediatized already, and employers have expectations of, for the majority of new jobs that are being created now, and an important component of all jobs, the expectation of workers, especially workers with advanced education like a post-secondary credential like ours, the expectation of the expectation on the part of employers for their new employees is that they are technically competent in the use of these mass media and also socialized into the use of those media. So it's not even primarily that you know how to code, it's that you're comfortable using these media. Does that seem realistic to you or plausible to you? Is that your experience of how you're preparing yourselves for the world of work? So that even if you go from our program and change direction a little bit and become an electrician, and you apprentice and you become an electrician, even as an electrician, even in the world of trade, your employer is going to expect you to be able to use a cell phone. Your employer is going to expect of you that a certain kind of fluency, a certain kind of literacy with these different media. And the media end up having a socializing impact on you. At least, but let me take a slight step back. Many sociologists who study this area are increasingly in agreement that this is the case. And most sociologists who are studying this are critical of it, are concerned about the ways that this might be problematic for society and problematic for groups and subgroups in society. So now I want to develop a little bit of vocabulary here. So what is it you think sociologists mean by digital native? Digital native is a term that was introduced 20 years or so ago by sociologists to describe a certain group of people. What do you think it means? Right. People who were born into a world that was already structured to at least a considerable degree by the digital media affordances is the, to my mind, irritating term, but that's the word. So and the cutoff is 1980. So people born in 1980 turned 20 in the year 2000. And I'm sure the people who came up with this date did the math. And that means that by the time they were 15, 20 years old, personal computers were widely available. By the time they were 15 or 20 years old, although, I mean, I'm a little puzzled by this. In 1980, I was in second year university, and nobody I knew had a computer. I didn't know anybody in computer science, so maybe they had computers at home. I kind of doubt it. But oh no, right. Of course, in 1980, you were 0 years old if you were a digital native. So in the year 2000, right. So in the year 2000, I was teaching at a university, and everybody had. Well, that's not true. In the year 2000, computers were still pretty expensive, and the digital gap, the digital divide, was more clearly marked. But the university had already converted to digital platforms, and a great deal of the material that was available was already available digitally. Cell phones were not yet a big thing, and in the year 2000, as late as really 2000, maybe 2005, we were still under the delusion that we would be able to keep phones out of the classroom. And you're all too young, presumably, to remember this, but I remember there were lots and lots of there was quite a bit of drama between old people like me and students around you having phones in classrooms, but we lost that struggle. Now phones are ubiquitous, and the corporations that run our universe have managed to trick all the management of all the universities and of all of everything practically into the idea that this is a good thing. I am absolutely not sold on that. I'm not sold that it's a good thing. I'm absolutely convinced that it's a real thing. And so digital natives are people who were born into that world. And so what is it you think that sociologists call the opposite of a digital native? So that would be me. I was shocked to find this. I was very surprised, but I don't think you'll get it. The digital immigrant. Digital primitives is more amusing. I like that better. And that would also actually capture, in a certain kind of way, this thing. I would say the way to try to understand the point that sociologists are making, to my mind, a little bit awkwardly, is that the contrast between a digital native and what the term I found in the literature, digital immigrant, is really a digital other. I wasn't born, so when I mentioned in 1980, I was already in university, and nobody had and certainly nobody had self capability that is really turning out to be the real game changer. Having a computer at home. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah, I have a little red. Okay, good. Okay. I'm going to, I don't know how to do anything about being a digital other or a philosopher. I don't have the technical ability to fix that, but now I'm back to green, so hopefully you can hear me. Now, part of the concern around this digital native versus digital immigrant has to do with the transformations that this is operating on our society and the changes in the expectations that we have of the generation that's coming up. And so people born after 1980 are digital natives. Most of you were born around the year 2000 and after. Most of you, meaning statistically Seneca students, not specifically the 7 people who are online right now. So most of you are well into this new generation, and the world of work into which you will all, or at least almost all of you, be going from after you're done here and after you're done at university and after you're done all of those things, the world of work into which you are going is increasingly determined by these digital technologies. And so it, of course, makes complete sense that to the extent that your education is meant to prepare you for that world, then to that extent, that education ought to prepare you to master these technologies, both from the point of view of the skills that are required and also from the point of view of the socializing you into those skills. Now, one of the challenges that we face, me on my side, as teacher and old person, and you on your side as student and young person, is that while the university is 1,000 years old and the printed book is 700 years old, digital technology is brand new. And so teaching you to code, even if I knew how, there's every reason to believe that in 5 years from now, coding will be significantly different. What we can do using the ancient technology of the university is prepare you to be socially oriented to and adaptive of these changing technologies. And that's really why the university remains, well, one version of, not hat do, sorry, I didn't even notice that typo on my PowerPoint. It shouldn't say hat do sociologists, it should say what do sociologists. And so sociologists studying this transition are concerned about how well is the university, how well equipped is the university to take on this task, and also how well equipped are we at as a society at maximally functionally adapting. So my own view is that that it's at least a potential problem. And here's an example of the kind of problem that I believe it is. When you come to class in another situation, so normally this would have happened, what we're doing right now would have happened in a classroom. And in that classroom, you wouldn't need to have a phone with you. You wouldn't need to have a laptop with you. You would need the minimum requirement, really, the minimum expectation, let's say, would be that you have a piece of paper and a pen. And that piece of paper and that pen would be all you'd require to take notes. This way, though, you need a laptop, you need all these other things, all of which require resources, meaning that this is not as equally available to everybody as it would otherwise be. But more problematic, in my view, much, much, much more problematic, in my view, is all the infrastructure that doing it this way requires. The college costs a lot of money to build, but it pales in comparison with all of the brand new infrastructure that's required. So all of the cell phone towers, all of the satellites that are circling around the globe, all of this digital infrastructure is being paid for to a great degree by taxes, and the profits are going to a great degree to the 1%. So 99% of us are paying for infrastructure that is benefiting, that is financially benefiting a tiny percentage of the population. And the mechanism through which all of us are being socialized to continue to operate in this society are requiring us to add to the profit that's being realized by, in my case, I can't tell who made the laptop, although you paid for it, not me. This is a college-owned laptop. So again, the taxes paid for my laptop, but you are all paying for your phones. Very probably, judging by the available data from Stats Canada, almost all of you are borrowing money right now to be able to pay for whatever it is in order to do this. And so you're paying for it, in a way, you're paying for it twice. You're making your minimum balance payments now, and the interest that is accumulating on the cost of doing this is something you're going to have to pay later. And by organizing our educational system through this platform that is generating a profit that wouldn't be happening if we were doing this in a classroom. In a classroom, in fact, you almost all already have cell phones anyway. And you almost all, although here I'm curious, what percentage of students do you think have cell phones, and what percentage of students do you think have laptops? Wow. Huh. Yeah, I'm 100% sure that it's not 100% of students who have a cell phone. 97% might be it, but there are, uh, well, anyway, let's just say I don't think it's 100%. What about laptops? They're kind of on their way out, aren't they? Right. I would say there's a significant difference between, and given a choice between a laptop and a cell phone, which would you pick, and which do you think most of your classmates would pick? So Patrick, you answered laptop. Did you mean for you, or do you think for that your classmates would go for a laptop? Right. So some people, for me anyway, I would pick a laptop over a cell phone for sure. Um, but I'm an outlier in a number of different ways for that reason. Right. So I think the cell phone would be, and there's a number of different reasons. Why is that? What is it about a cell phone? Right. So in a certain way, smartphones can do almost everything a laptop can do. And there's some things that I think there are some things that a laptop can't do that only a cell phone can do. Am I right about that? Or can your laptop do, if you're smart enough, can your laptop do everything a cell phone can do? I don't know the answer to that. So, in terms of the way this new world, in terms of the way media, mass media, digital media are changing the dynamics of socialization in the modern world, one of the issues that's come up recently that's being made clearer, excuse me, uh, as a result of COVID forcing us online is that it's redrawing the boundaries between areas of our lives that used to be a little bit more clearly separate, and namely the boundaries between the world of work and the world of family, or the private world and the world of work. How is it doing that? Can you imagine some of the ways that it's doing that? I'll repeat the question. Ralph asked me to repeat the question. I'm happy to repeat the question. What are some of the ways that the COVID forced transition to online learning and teaching is revealing how digital media are redrawing boundaries between work and private life? For some people, anyway. Well, it's not so much that because everything is on a phone or a laptop, it's because everything is on a phone or a laptop. Employers now are increasingly expecting their workers to be as available as their phone is. And so in the case of what I'm doing right now is I'm at home right now, and although my kids are older and they've moved out, many of my colleagues are teaching from home. And although this week in Ontario, the schools went, most schools have gone, my understanding is anyway, most public and high schools have gone back to in person teaching. For the last little while, those of my colleagues who were teaching online and had children who were in elementary school, they had to work from home, and their children were learning from home. So they were at home and they were at work at the same time. And the boundary between work and home, in many ways, what it is that the school, public school for grade 1 say to grade 6, high school from grade 7 to grade 12, post-secondary education after grade 12, each in their own ways are instances of socializing younger people, preparing you to participate in the world of work. And in each of those cases, one of the changes that's occurred, certainly during my lifetime, and in fact, I'm pretty sure during your lifetime, is those boundaries between school and home are also changing, also becoming more and more porous, also being redrawn. And many sociologists are concerned that they're being redrawn dramatically to the advantage of employers and to the disadvantage of some workers. And so what's happening is workers being increasingly available to their employers, as their phones are, has meant that the expectations that employers have of their employees, correspondingly the expectation that employers have of their potential employees, is that they are going to be increasingly available, and that time is no longer going to be an absolutely organizing factor in how work gets done and in what's expected of workers. That is, unless we resist. And the resistance is being organized, and that's always been the case. Resistance needn't be taken to be as dramatic as I intended it to be. Resistance is a sociological dynamic that occurs in all human circumstances, and its resistance contributes to the adaptation of all of the different elements of human interaction to it's one component of the way humans have been adapting to their circumstances for as long as there have been humans. You resist the things I tell you, and as they come to make sense, your resistance allows you to understand them and to apply them where it's to your advantage, and to ignore them where it's not to your advantage. And when you make that evaluation correctly, then you have been using this institution properly. And when you fail to make that evaluation correctly, then you're underusing the institution. You're not using it to the greatest degree to your advantage, individually and collectively. So now another term that came up that surprised me, what is nomophobia? Has anyone heard this term before? I found it today. So when I was preparing for class, this is a new term. Nomophobia is, and when I first saw it, I thought they were kidding. Nomophobia is the fear of not having a mobile phone with you, the fear of being out of digital contact with the digital world. And there's quite a bit of research on this. research that I have deep suspicion about, really. But in any event, does this sound like it could even possibly be a thing? Apparently, some of the so this is obviously a brand new, brand new. I mean, maybe 5 years, maybe a little bit more, candidate for social scientific and health studies research, but it's being put forward as a fear on the same order as other kinds of sources of organized distress that are dysfunctional for human activity. And it's the fear of being out of access. And it's does this seem possible to you? Right, exactly. Yes, I think Brenda's right. I agree that it's definitely real. Uh, what would that, so maybe Brenda or someone else could maybe describe a little bit how they understand this, not necessarily from a first-hand point of view, but from a more descriptive account, a neutral account. What would be, for example, symptoms of nomophobia? Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Sorry, I'm just having time typing today. It's just like when you don't have your phone on you, getting that like rush of anxiety, needing to make sure it's always there, constantly checking your apps when you do have it, just needing to know exactly where it is on your body.
Wow. So had you heard this term before?
No, but I definitely feel it.
Right. So in a way, that's an interesting phenomenon. To me, it's an interesting phenomenon when a word, when you hear a term for the first time and it corresponds super well to something you experienced that you never fully realized had a name. Does that capture a little bit what you're talking about? Or did you imagine that it was a thing that just didn't have a name yet?
I know it was definitely a thing. I just didn't know if there was a name for it because like I've like been like a kilometer and a half away from my house, turned around and walked all the way back just to get my phone because I can't do anything without knowing it's on me.
Right. And I bet I can't exactly remember for sure, but I bet that phenomenon with or without the name is widely enough acknowledged that it's probably part of comedy routines on TV shows. And I've used that example. I mentioned that today was the first time I'd ever heard this term, but in discussing the impact of digital technology, I've asked students a number of times in the past, how far away from home would you have to be? How much trouble would you be prepared to go through to recover your phone? How important is having a phone on you, to you, subjectively? And I didn't even know the term existed. But anxiety is, did you use the word anxiety, Brenda? Right. So the experience of anxiety is the hallmark that it's that it has an ongoing impact, that it's reached into you. It's not just irritating, like if you forget your book or whatever. It's more substantial than that, and it's an indication. It's not a guarantee, but it's at least an indication of the extent to which your experience is importantly structured by whatever it is that's generating that anxiety. So you're disoriented when you don't have your phone. And to the extent that so now I recognize a little bit what you mean. When you'll touch your coat to make sure your phone is in the pocket you think it is. Is that one of the things you had in mind? Was that what you were saying? Or your purse or wherever your bag or whatever, wherever your phone might be. So now what does that tell us about, or does that tell us anything about the impact that that this technology, this set of technologies has on our lives. Another term that I'll just introduce, oh, wait a minute, it's gone. I didn't type it in. So one of the words that they use now, there's a couple of research sociologists at the University of Toronto doing a lot of work on this. They call it digital tethering. I'll type it just so you can see something. Digital tethering. So does anyone know what a tether is? It's a rope, right? So it's a rope that's used to tie something down. So imagine one of those balloons that you travel in. What are they called? I don't even know. Like a air balloon. When they're held down to the ground, they're tethered to the ground. And that anxiety that Brenda was describing, and I think she was describing it in the first person, but in any event, lots of people experience this. It's the ability. How might this be an advantage from the point of view of the companies that benefit, that profit from these devices? I'm doing a sort of a loop around to get back to the sociological point I want to make. Right. And we're so dependent on that product that it causes, and here I'm not sure, I'm sure they're doing research on this. I'm not sure I'm convinced by the research yet, but there are physical manifestations of this. This anxiety is not just in your head, which I think is a very unfortunate expression, but I'm running out of time, so I'm having to cut some corners here. Your heart races, your blood pressure goes up. There are physical manifestations of anxiety that, at least in other circumstances, are very, very well documented, very closely tied to those sources of anxiety. And to the extent that our physically immediate connection to our devices is a source of anxiety, that also very predictably can be connected to physical manifestations of that anxiety. Now, achieving that benefits, or would be a benefit to the phone companies, because the more you use your phone, the more they're able to turn that into their financial advantage. So it's not like you're likely to buy a second phone, right? The market saturation for phones is already very high. One of the things they do with phones is the same strategy that academic publishers do with textbooks, is they change them up. And they change them up in ways that means that you have to get a new version in order to get the same advantage out of the old version. And so lots of people are committed to, in some ways against their own will, in other ways against their own interests, they're committed to buying a new phone as the new capabilities become available. Another way that there's this integration between the phone companies and the media companies' financial advantages and the way that we're socialized is that more and more the things we use the phone for are being integrated across platforms, and so I'm not on Twitter or Instagram or those things, but I gather there's tons and tons of overlap between those things. Is that right? Is that your experience of your usage of those platforms? So basically what I'm asking is, when you think you've forgotten your phone and you sweat for a second and then, oh, it's in your other pocket, So, or let's say you've left your phone somewhere and you've been without your phone for X number of minutes and it's been on your mind and you check your phone. What is it you check for when you check your phone after you've been away from your phone for a while? And it doesn't have to be Brenda. It'd be good in some ways if someone else would chip in. So, what kind of messages, though? I'm going to suggest another kind of thing that's at least loosely related. I think it's the same thing. Family, damily. That's interesting. But one of the really, I think, cunning is the term that came to mind, is the idea that when you post something online, one of the things that you want, now I don't necessarily mean any one of you individually, what you want is your post to be liked. Is that accurate? Huh, good. So you post something on Instagram and you want, are they followers on Instagram? Is that what the vocabulary is? So your friends on Facebook, what is it they say about like what's the term to describe? So your followers on Instagram, uh, I gather that on Facebook you like stuff. Is it the same on Instagram and whatever the other things are? So you post a picture of a puppy on Instagram, or you post a meme, some clever meme, and one of the things that happens is when you turn your phone on, I gather, uh, what will show up on your phone is one of your friends will have posted a picture of a puppy or, a joke. Those are my two go-to categories. And you will type back, you will either put a thumbs up or some emoticon thing saying, oh, that's funny, out of solid, for a variety of different reasons. And when you put something out on the internet, one of the things you want is for other people to acknowledge that you've met the expectations of the medium. Is that an accurate description? And you get a rush. I've read a little bit on this. It turns out that the internet companies are 100%, the media companies are 100% clear about this, and that they have set it up in order to take advantage of this, and that the networks over which all of this information is being exchanged are tracked very, very, very carefully using extraordinarily sophisticated mathematical algorithms. I don't think there's other kinds of algorithms, but anyway, algorithms to see, to try to extract from all of that interaction patterns that are of commercial value to anyone, or even more problematically, in my view, interactions that are of interest to the government. But that'll be maybe for another topic. The commercial point is that if you like a puppy, then people who sell puppies want to know about this, but they don't care if you just like puppies because they're cute. What they want is they want to know if you liking puppies means you're likely to buy puppies, or if you liking puppies means you're likely to buy, I can't think of what it would be on. They track our interactions in order to extract information, in order to work backwards from what our interactions tell us to what our likely purchasing patterns are going to be. And it's in that kind of interaction, or it's against the background of that kind of interaction that we're doing our teaching, that I'm doing my teaching right now, and you're doing your learning right now. And also, in the very same process, I'm doing my professional work. So my job, my livelihood is your being a student is providing me with my livelihood. And that exchange is being mediated through this for-profit mechanism that is absolutely outside of the control, the democratic control of the ways that the content and the all of the other kinds of modalities of control. So I'm a public servant, right? The government sanctions so your tuition fees pay for some of my wages. Government taxes pay for the rest of my wages. So it's a combination of your tuition and your taxes that pay for my wages. And the reason, the general reason why you're doing this is because you have enough confidence in the government and enough confidence in the college that they're hiring the right people overall to do this. So I've got credentials. I have a PhD. The government hired me, and they haven't fired me yet. So that means I'm not doing such a bad job that I can't keep my job. So I'm still doing this. And overall, the college is working well enough that students keep enrolling. All of these things are controlled more or less through the mechanisms of society, through democratic mechanisms. But they're increasingly being taken over by marketplace mechanisms that distribute their advantages and their disadvantages in a very different way than how government and democratically elected governments distribute their advantages and disadvantages. And the same with the marketplace into which you will all be going, and into which I already am. And so we have this mechanism of mass media that is through which you are being socialized, and I am being socialized for the changing world of work. And we don't understand it nearly as well as we understand many of the other aspects of socialization, like in-person schooling, for example, or the family, for example. Okay, so I've gone 10 minutes over my time. Thank you for your patience. And I'm covering ground that's new for me, and I'm covering ground here that is theoretically new, that is new ground for sociological theorizing. So some of this is not yet very well described in the sociological literature, at least not in the sociological literature with which I'm familiar. But in 5-10 years from now, there's every reason to believe that, of course, this will be, that, this is a for sure growing component of what sociologists and social scientists are trying to understand. Okay, so thank you for your extra patience today. I hope you have a good weekend. I'm going to turn the recording off now. No, that's not it. So